What's the matter, Grandma? You calling your knitting club? One of the bikers laughed, slapping the hood of her car. Another leaned in close, sneering. You think one little phone call's gonna save you from us? But the woman didn't blink, didn't argue. She just closed her flip phone. Calm, steady, like she'd just started a countdown. What they didn't know was that she wasn't calling for help. She was calling a promise. And 20 minutes later, the ground beneath Fallridge would tremble. Not from fear, but from the roar of engines, driven by veterans. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Fallridge, Georgia, a sleepy town with a two-pump gas station, one high school, and a diner where everyone knew your name. I'd worked at Rosie's Diner for 18 years, pouring coffee, hearing gossip, and watching time crawl. But that Tuesday morning, just past 8 a.m., something happened that would rip through Fallridge like thunder. Her name was Evelyn Mae Carter, 90 years old, sharp as a tack, and quiet as a Sunday morning. She came into Rosie's every other day, sat at the window seat, and ordered black coffee with one cream. Never two, just one. I'd heard whispers over the years that she'd been some kind of pilot in the war, but folks around here didn't pry, not when it came to war stories. She never talked about it, never needed to. You could see it in her posture, the way she moved like someone who'd stared death in the face and walked right past it. That morning, she hadn't come into the diner. Instead, I saw her through the big diner window, pulling into Mixed Gas and Tire just across the street. Her old Ford Taurus was like her. Stubborn, reliable, a little scratched up, but still running. I was topping off the coffee at table 3 when the rumble started. At first, I thought it was just someone speeding down Main Street, but then the sound grew. Deep, hungry, like something tearing through the earth. I looked out the window, and there they were. Motorcycles, a dozen at first, then more. They poured into the gas station like a wave of chrome and leather. Loud, arrogant, the Black Venom Riders, folks called them. They weren't from Fallridge, but they'd been showing up more and more lately, pushing folks around, claiming territory like we were still in the Wild West. And there, pumping her gasoz, was Evelyn Mae Carter. I froze, holding a half-empty coffee pot, watching the scene unfold across the street like a slow-motion nightmare. The leader, tall, heavy-set, with a crooked scar running down his face, stepped off his bike. Everyone knew him by one name, Havoc, the kind of man who chewed with his mouth open and spit danger like it was second nature. He swaggered toward her like a lion stalking an old lamb. "Hey, Grandma," I could hear him jeering even from across the street. "What's a dusty relic like you doing out here with real men?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Just kept pumping her gas like she'd done it 1,000 times. That's when he saw the Vietnam veteran plate frame on her bumper. He laughed, a cold, mocking laugh that turned my stomach. "A vet?" he scoffed. "What did you do, make coffee for the real soldiers?" The other riders chuckled, forming a loose circle around her car. I grabbed the diner's old landline and dialed the sheriff, but deep down I knew it wouldn't matter. Sheriff Deacon wouldn't get here in time, not with how slow his department moved when it came to these biker types. Across the street, Evelyn put the gas nozzle back in place. She turned to Havoc, Yarmao, calm, composed, like she was correcting a child. "I flew a UH-1 Huey through combat zones," she said. "Rescued 214 wounded men from places you couldn't spell if your life depended on it." Havoc laughed, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the kind that said this wasn't the reaction he expected. He stepped closer. Too close, his hand grip on her arm, tight and mean. "You think you're still somebody," he hissed. "This town doesn't belong to you anymore." And that's when she said it. Just one sentence, soft but sharp as broken glass. "Son, you don't know who I am, but you're about to find out." She pulled out a phone, old flip kind, pressed one number. The gang laughed, real hard this time. "Call the bingo hall?" one of them shouted, but she wasn't dialing the bingo hall. She was calling someone she hadn't spoken to in 34 years. Outside Rosie's Diner, I watched Evelyn Carter close her flip phone with that same calm she always carried, like nothing had just happened. But something had. She didn't call 911. She didn't call a neighbor. She called someone from another life, a life that most people in this town didn't know she had. Havoc still stood there, confused, arms crossed, trying to decide if he'd just been challenged or dismissed. "What was that, Grandma?" he sneered. "You calling your knitting club?" But Evelyn just opened the car door as if he and his gang weren't even worth her breath. One of his boys stepped forward, Snake, they called him, and slammed the door shut before she could sit. The sound echoed across the gas station lot, and even I flinched. "You don't just walk away from us," Snake growled. Evelyn stared him down, unmoved. "I've walked away from burning helicopters, son. You're not fire. You're just smoke." And something in the way she said it, like she'd already measured the worst they could do and found it lacking, made the entire gang hesitate. Just for a second. But it was long enough. Because not 15 minutes later, the sound of engines came again, this time from the south side of town. A different kind of rumble. Not loud and chaotic like the Black Venom Riders. This was steady, disciplined, like the sound of boots hitting pavement in perfect time. I stepped out of the diner, shielding my eyes from the morning glare, and then I saw them. Motorcycles, dozens of them, rolling 2 by 2, black helmets, matching jackets, no skulls, no flames, just one patch stitched across their backs. Freedom Guard, Veterans Chapter 8. My heart jumped. I'd heard of them. A nationwide group of combat veterans who rode to protect their own. They didn't show up unless something serious had gone down. And they didn't wear their patches unless it meant something. Leading them was a man I recognized from an old photograph that Evelyn once carried in her wallet. Tall, silver-haired, with a scar above his brow, and the kind of presence that made men stand straighter just by looking at him. Colonel James Iron Jack Maddox. He was the one she'd saved in Vietnam. And now he was here. They didn't stop at the edge of the gas station. They rolled straight in, no hesitation. A wall of calm, determined power. Havoc's smirk faltered. "Who the hell are these clowns?" Iron Jack parked first, removed his helmet, looked Havoc dead in the eye. "I'm the man who owes his life to that woman right there," he said, voice steady. "And I brought some friends." The other riders dismounted, silent, composed. And for the first time, I saw fear creep into the Black Venom Riders. "Is this some kind of joke?" Havoc asked, but his voice didn't carry like it did before. "No joke," Iron Jack said. "But here's the punchline. You lay a hand on her again, and we'll show you what respect really looks like." One of the bikers with Jack, a tall black man with Navy SEAL ink, added, "She's the reason my brother made it home. Say another word and I swear to God, you won't finish it." For a moment, I thought it would come to blows. Then something I'll never forget happened. Evelyn stepped forward, no fear, no anger, just quiet strength. "This town doesn't belong to anyone," she said, "but it remembers who defended it." And behind her, a group of locals had begun to gather, quietly, watching, not hiding anymore, some with hands folded, others with phones out, recording everything. The tide had turned. Havoc saw it too. He cursed under his breath, spat on the ground, then threw a glare at Evelyn like he still held the upper hand. "This ain't over, Grandma." Evelyn didn't flinch. "It was over the moment you laid hands on a soldier." The Freedom Guard began forming a loose circle around her, not threatening but protective, like a shield she didn't need, but they insisted on giving. I stood there, coffee pot forgotten in my hand, watching something I'd never seen before. An old war igniting quietly on American soil, not with guns, but with memory and loyalty. And I realized something right then. This wasn't just about Evelyn. This was about all of them. All the veterans who came home and faded into the background. All the kindness we forgot to return, and all the strength we'd mistaken for silence. You could feel it in the air, like a storm building behind the clouds. After the Freedom Guards showed up that morning, the town of Fall Ridge changed. People walked straighter. Shopkeepers didn't glance over their shoulders as often. And for the first time in weeks, there was laughter at Rosie's diner that wasn't nervous or forced. But it was too quiet, too easy. And Evelyn May Carter knew better than anyone, peace after confrontation wasn't peace at all. It was the pause before someone decided to push back harder. From my window at the diner, I watched as she met with Iron Jack that afternoon. They sat at her booth in the back, the one she never let anyone else take. He'd brought maps. not just of Fall Ridge, but the surrounding areas. Truck routes, escape roads, abandoned warehouses. It wasn't just nostalgia. They were planning. I refilled their coffee without asking a word. Their silence spoke louder than anything. Outside, the black Venom riders had vanished. For a moment, we thought they'd run. But when Havoc disappeared, that didn't mean surrender. It meant trouble. Big trouble. Because people like Havoc don't back down. They build bombs in the dark. That evening, the first sign came. The windows of Peterson's Hardware, a family-run store that had displayed a small American flag with a veteran-owned sticker, were smashed in. Nothing stolen, just destroyed. Then the next night, Dinah's salon had red paint thrown across its front steps. Dinah's husband? Retired Marine. It wasn't random. Havoc was sending a message. Fall Ridge doesn't change without consequences. But Evelyn? She didn't flinch. She called a meeting at the VA Support Center, just outside of town. It wasn't just the Freedom Guard anymore. Word had spread. Veterans from nearby counties came in trucks and bikes, some missing limbs, others carrying scars deeper than the eye could see. And they came for her. For the woman who once pulled men out of hot zones under rocket fire. For the woman who never asked for a thank you. At the center, Evelyn stood up in front of them, tall, dignified in her olive cardigan and service pin. No speech, no drama. Just this. They're not just trying to scare me. They're trying to scare what I represent. Then she paused, eyes steady. We're not going to let them. That was all it took. Plans unfolded faster than a battle briefing. Iron Jack assigned 3 veterans to each key block of downtown. Not for violence, for presence. Quiet strength. The kind that lets a town know its backbone hasn't broken. But Havoc wasn't done. He wanted to make an example. That night, one of the Freedom Guard's bikes was found in a ditch. Tires slashed, seat burned, and a note left under the gas tank. Next time, it's not the bike. We all knew what that meant. So did Evelyn. She didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The following morning, I opened Rosie's earlier than usual, and I wasn't surprised when Evelyn was already there, sipping her coffee in the half-dark. Lila, she said quietly, I need to ask you something. When they come, and they will, I want you to do one thing. Anything, I whispered. Stay where it's safe. Let us handle it. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Across town, Havoc was preparing his strike. Not at random, not in rage, but with a calculated plan. He'd recruited help, outside muscle, ex-military turned mercenary. The kind of men who didn't care about towns or morals, only paychecks. They'd been promised a slice of the town once Havoc took full control. And tonight, they'd make their first move. They chose a target close to the heart, the VA Center itself, because nothing says we own you like attacking the place that gives people hope. But what they didn't know was, Evelyn had expected that, and she had a plan of her own. The night fell over Fall Ridge like a blanket soaked in gasoline. We all felt it, that stillness, the kind that comes just before thunder. I closed Rosie's diner early, per Evelyn's warning, and watched from the kitchen window as the streetlights flickered under a low, heavy sky. At the VA Support Center, a small gathering was still underway. Nothing official, just quiet company. Evelyn sat with Iron Jack and a few Freedom Guard members, playing cards by the window, like it was just another Tuesday night. But it wasn't. She knew they were coming, and she knew exactly how. What Havoc didn't realize was that the old veteran he mocked wasn't just a pilot, she was a tactician. She hadn't flown helicopters blind into hot zones without knowing how to read the ground. And now Fall Ridge was her battlefield. Through a network of radios, text, and code phrases, Evelyn had mapped every route into the VA Center and placed veterans in strategic shadows. They were dressed like locals, store clerks, park goers, janitors, but they were trained soldiers in disguise. And they weren't waiting to fight. They were waiting to record, because that's what would win this war. Not fists, not guns, but proof. At exactly 10:42 p.m. the attack began. A black van with its lights off barreled down Oak Street, followed by 4 motorcycles. They moved in a staggered line, textbook perimeter breach formation. I could see it all from the back alley behind my diner. I pressed my earpiece, patched into the Freedom Guard's comms. They're moving, I whispered. Same pattern we expected. Let them in, came Evelyn's voice, calm, measured. Let them walk right into the light. As soon as the van rolled up to the VA center, the riders dismounted. They wore masks, not to hide their identities, but to look more terrifying. They hadn't noticed the discreet floodlights positioned on nearby rooftops. Until Evelyn pressed a button, and suddenly light exploded across the parking lot. Blinding white beams lit up every shadow, revealing not just the attackers, but everything they were carrying. Pipes, chains, and in one man's waistband, a gun. Drones rose silently from behind the roofline, all controlled from inside the center. They hovered like wasps above the gang, cameras trained in recording. One of Havoc's men cursed, tried to run. A net dropped from above, deployed by two ex-Air Force engineers hiding in the second-floor janitor closet. By the time the gang realized it was a setup, it was too late. From every alley and building corner, veterans stepped out. Dozens, some in jeans and baseball caps, some wearing old military patches, all of them ready, not to fight, but to witness. Evelyn stepped forward from the entrance of the VA center, Center. She was unarmed. She didn't need weapons. Her voice carried louder than any siren. You came here to silence us. But now the whole world's going to hear you. The gang members hesitated. Some tried to flee, but the exits had already been blocked off. And now, from the edge of the street, two black SUVs pulled in. Doors opened. Federal agents, DEA, ATF, FBI, all called in with evidence Evelyn had been building for weeks. Videos, wiretaps, surveillance from reactivated security cams across town. The Freedom Guard hadn't just been patrolling, they'd been building a case. And tonight it paid off. Havoc wasn't there. He was watching from a rooftop nearby, thinking he'd be safe. But he didn't see Sarah Chen, a former Army intel officer who'd tracked his signal from the first text he sent earlier that day. She approached him silently, cuffs ready. No more running, she whispered. I watched as it all unfolded. A quiet, calculated storm. No gunshots, no bloodshed, just justice. Carried out by those who once fought overseas, now fighting for home. Evelyn walked past the stunned gang members, many of whom had dropped their weapons and stood with hands shaking. She didn't gloat. She just said, you thought age made me weak. It made me patient. And with that, the fight for Fall Ridge was over. Or so we thought, because the most important battle was still ahead. How to rebuild, together. The dust hadn't even settled when the questions began. What would happen next? Would Fall Ridge fall back into fear? Or could something stronger rise from the ashes? The morning after the ambush, I opened Rosie's at sunrise. The streets were quiet, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of change. Evelyn was already at her booth, sipping black coffee like she always did. Iron Jack arrived soon after, still wearing the same jacket from the night before. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. But the town did. By noon, shop owners who had once lived in quiet terror stood outside their storefronts, sweeping glass, repainting walls, and nodding to one another like something had shifted, like the spell of silence had been broken. Tommy from the auto shop, a Gulf War vet who never talked about it, put up a new sign. Veterans Guard protected. Respect is not optional. That sign started a ripple. Soon others followed. Diana's salon reopened with two of the Freedom Guard members helping fix her broken awning. And then something none of us expected happened. The town started healing. Together. Sarah Chen, now working with federal liaisons, helped establish a program that offered returning gang members a way out. Those who didn't partake in the violence but wanted to leave the life behind, they were given a second chance. And the town welcomed them, cautiously but sincerely. Even Diesel, Havoc's former right-hand man, chose redemption. He stood on the courthouse steps, shaking Iron Jack's hand, then turned himself in. I was lost, he said, but she helped me remember what real strength looks like. He didn't need to name who, everyone knew it was Evelyn. As for Havoc, he faced a long list of federal charges. He wouldn't be returning. But something Evelyn said the night of his arrest stayed with me. You don't win by destroying. You win by showing there's a better way. And she did. Because by the end of that month, Fall Ridge didn't just rebuild. It redefined itself. We held a town gathering in the park. The mayor, who'd once dismissed the Freedom Guard as rowdy outsiders, now stood beside Evelyn Carter as she received a proclamation, honorary guardian of Fallridge. She accepted it humbly, smiled, then turned to the crowd and said, "This title doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who stood up when it counted." And that was her way. Quiet, humble, unshakable. One night, weeks later, after closing the diner, I walked out to find Evelyn standing at the edge of the square looking up at the new flagpole the veterans had installed. The stars and stripes fluttered under the moonlight. "Did you ever think you'd be back in a fight like this?" I asked. She smiled. "It's not about the fight, Lila. It's about reminding people that strength doesn't retire." That stuck with me because Fallridge didn't just need saving, it needed reminding. And thanks to one 90-year-old woman with a spine of steel and a heart made of quiet fire, we remembered and we never forgot again. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Grateful Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.